Okay, this is the second, and this will be, I hope, a fairly quick overview. And this is our Stamp Club meeting. Again, people, please leave your unmute. You don't need to mute because this is meant to be more of a, if you have any questions, we can chat about it. I always feel like I'm confessing when I'm with you guys, but here's my other confession, or another one. I had not used this stamp set until maybe 2 days ago. I've been looking at it. I've been thinking I need to do it. I was churning ideas around in my brain of how to use it. And I finally just said, stop thinking and sit down and use it. So I did. And I'm sure there are many, many, many ways that people use, and I'm really focused on this stamp. This is one stamp. This whole thing that has numbers on it is one stamp. And I'm sure there are many, many different ways to use it, but I figured out a way that allowed me to create this calendar, which is a 4x6, and it goes through every month of the year. It is going to end up being something that I'm going to decorate, and then I'm going to pop it into my Tollsby frame. So I started off with trying to figure out how can I make this into a 4x6 calendar that is going to fit, and it fits perfectly, and it's centered, and it looks good, and I'm happy. So I'm going to show you how I did that. And as I do this, you will find out that you can customize your calendars to whatever size you want. All right. Do not laugh at me over the next few minutes, because you're going to want to, I promise, as you think, dear God in heaven, this woman has lost her mind. Okay. So the first thing that I did, and pretend that that is not there, is I got out a piece of 4x6 paper. I knew where I was going. So the first thing you need to do is figure out how big do you want your calendar, and about where do you want your calendar. And I put that into my Stamparatus. A stamping tool is the only way you're going to be able to make calendars with this. You're going to need a Stamparatus or another tool that allows you to do multiple stamping. Otherwise, it's not going to work. And you just need to trust me on that. So what's kind of funny is if you look at January 2023, it starts on a Sunday. It was perfect as an example, because what I'm going to do is the way that the stamp is set up, I need to stamp just what's to the right of my hand, because in the US, we start with Sunday. So I'm starting with Sunday through Saturday, and I need 31 days for January. So it was super cool that I was able to just start with that month. And I could have just done it as a test anyway. So the first thing I did was I put the paper in the size that I want to use. And then I put my stamp, the entire one, and you can see I've used it a lot. I put it in my Stamparatus so that it was about centered. And just focus on 1 through 7 because we're focusing on January. So I put that so it was about centered between the right and the left. Okay. And I also wanted to make sure there was enough room at the bottom, because for me, when I stick my 4x6 into this frame, some of it's going to sink into the bottom. So I just needed to make sure for this purpose that I had enough room at the bottom. You'll be able to do whatever you want. And then I took out the piece that I had measured, so I know where I'm going. And the next thing I did, and ignore the lines that are on here, because I'll explain to you what they are in a minute, and that's where you're going to laugh at me, and I'll be okay with that, is I got out a piece of, this is just scrap paper. And I used VersaFine ink rather than Memento. For me, this works really, really, really well on fine detail. And these are pretty small numbers. I inked up the entire thing and I stamped my paper. Okay. So I'm building a grid. I just did the entire stamp. Now, this is where you are going to say, please stop talking. What I wanted to do is I'm not going to move this stamp as I create the months. I'm going to move my paper. Because if I've got a month that, let's say it starts on, this would be Tuesday, I want to put my paper in so that I grab Tuesday, and let's say it has 31 days. That's what I want to stamp. And I want to figure out a way that I can move my paper and not move this. I want to leave that where it is. So what I did is I looked at this and I got my ruler out and I was thinking, all right, could it be, it would be so nice if the numbers, the end of the number, so right after 5 and 15 and right after 4 and 14 and right after 3 and 13, if they were the same distance apart. But they're not, because a 1 is not as wide as a 2. A 0 is wider than a 1. So they're not the same distance. So then I got my little ruler, and all I did was I took it and I drew a straight line right at the end of the number. And I went to the next one and I drew a line. Same thing, all the way over. So I know if I have a piece of paper, how far it is that I need to move it so that I can get on that, whatever day of the week is the first day. So here it would be a Monday if I want to do 1 through 6 and all the way down. And then I thought, that's great. That's fabulous. But if I have this paper, I'm not going to be able to see where it is that I need to move that easily, because I'll have to continue to look down here. And so I got out an index card. Yep, this is where the world turns a little weird. And I put it so it is on that line. The first line that I drew is on the right-hand side. And I put little tick marks where my lines were. This is going to show me how wide that is, how wide those lines are between each other. And then I wrote down 1 through 7 for my first row on the week. And this is my cheat sheet. So let me show you how this works. And you may not think I'm crazy after you see how this works. So if I leave my stamp on the plate, it's always going to be right here. Every time I stamp this up and I move it, it's going to stamp in that exact same place. So let's do January. I've got my 4x6. I know because January starts on a Sunday. January starts on a Sunday. So I want 1 through 7, and I know it's 31 days. So I'm trying to recreate the numbers that I did in here. Let's just look before I stamp anything. If I simply ink that up and I stamp it, I'm going to get more than I want. I'm going to get the 6 and the 7, this area here, the columns that have the 6 and the 7 at the top. I don't want that. I want starting with 1 and all the way over. So this is where you do a little masking. And I just grabbed some scrap paper that I have. And I can peek up underneath and I can see, okay, I just want to go here. I want to mask off these ones. I don't want to stamp 6 and 7. So I know it's this line. So if I put that piece of paper, so it's going to mask off the 6 and the 7, and you can see that row is not going to be stamped. I'm going to put that over a little bit more to the right. then that row is not going to be stamped, but I'm going to get everything else I want. Well, let me prove that that's right. So I'm going to ink up that stamp. I don't need to go all the way over. Yeah, I do need to go all the way over. I also don't want to screw up my little template. So I just have little scrap pieces of paper. So I'm also just going to put one scrap piece right over those numbers because I don't want them to get stamped over. I want to continue to use that because if I take this stamp off and I want to recreate it, I have that stamped image and I can just put it back in place and I'll be able to get that stamp exactly where I want it to be. All right, so I'm inking that. I've got my 1 through 31. I can take this mask off. And I've got January. So there's January. That's all good. And then what I did is on the other side, I put the Sunday through Saturday stamp and I align that so that it's always going to be over the days of the week. And I stamped that. And I did it in blue because I wanted each of the months to have a different color. January was easy. And I was happy that January was easy because that was the first one that I wanted to do. Well, let's look at February. February is going to show you where we're going here. February. February starts on a Wednesday. February only has 28 days. There's a little bit of a complication that we're running into, right? Let's think about this. So what I want is I want February to start on a Wednesday. And the way that I did this was whatever the last number of the first week, showing you what I'm talking about. Here's January again. January went 1 through 7. This is 1 through 7. That means that the paper that I'm going to put in when I stamp it is going to go all the way over to the right. And it's going to capture 1 through 7. So that's what that 7 means. Well, February. February ends in a 4. Okay. So that means that I'm going to put my paper right at the tick mark after 4. And I'm just going to put that in. And let's take a look at what that does before we stamp anything. Let's just kind of look and see. Okay. Well, we need to mask off after 4. We also need to mask off before 5. And darn it, we don't want 29, 30, or 31 to show up. That's fine. We can do that. So I've got it. And I'm triple checking. That looks right. Okay. I've got it. So it would center. And that's why it's after number 4. And then I need to do some masking again. Cool. We'll do that. So that means that it's ending in 4. So I want 1 mask, and we're going to be able to check this when we look at it. I want that to go about right there. Let's take a peek. Yep, that's good. So 5 and out, that's not going to stamp. Cool. Then I also want to make sure that, let's see, if I've got, goes through 4, then anything before 5, I don't want that to stamp either. So I'm just going to flip this over and say, okay, where's 5 in here? So I don't want anything. I want my 5 to stamp, but I don't want anything after that. So I'm going to put that right in there. I'm just going to take a peek. Let's see. Yep, 5 is going to stamp. I want that. 4 is going to stamp, but I've got to figure out how to get rid of this silly 29, 30, and 31. Well, the only way that I could figure out how to do that was to just put another piece of paper. And I'm just going to tack that down with washi. So I'm going to get all of my crazy little pieces of paper in here. And then I'm going to put it so that it's going to block out 29, 30, and 31. And I'm going to look at it one more time. Just make sure I'm good to go. So it looks good. So we're going to go ahead and stamp that. And if you're doing multiple calendars, I would strongly recommend that you stamp the same month a couple of times, because you'll have everything set up. You won't have to move anything. And it will all be fine. So that's February. So let's make sure that we did February correctly. So here's February. It starts on Wednesday, ends on a Tuesday. It's got 28 days and it's nice and centered. So that's what I did for each of these months. And then, like I said, let me show you. I'm going to take this out. The same process was done for each of the months. You can ignore that. That was my first attempt. And then, because each month was stamped in the same way, where the weeks should line up appropriately, I put the Sunday through Saturday stamp on the other side, other part of the plate. I put it in the same place and I stamped that for every month. It doesn't need to move because I centered each of the months when I was stamping them. And I just decided that I was going to stamp each of the rows that has Sunday through Saturday in a different color so that it would stand out as I went through the calendar. Does that make any sense?
It does, but it is very difficult if you ask me.
To me, and I think part of it, I love puzzles. And for me, it was a massive puzzle to figure out how to make this thing work, because I was not going to be beaten by it. And I really wanted to just think of a quick-ish way to do it. I mean, I've seen painful ways that people use this, and I thought there's got to be a better way. So yeah, it's a little intense just getting it set up and getting this jig put together. I will go through and I'll show a little bit more in detail how I did it. I didn't want to bore you guys to tears, but it's not hard once you've done one or two and just getting everything lined up the way that you want it to be. So
I have to trust you on that one. Okay, I'm just saying.
So I'm going to stop this recording